You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is February 11th, 2026, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we're bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your regions, and bringing you stories from a liberty perspective. Today, we're going to talk about a few different things that have come up. There's Jimmy Lai, who is a free speech advocate in Hong Kong. Has been given a pretty harsh sentence about a day ago, and so we'll talk about him a little bit. We're also going to talk about a decision that was made in the courts recently where they found a doctor who provided trans care to a minor liable for that surgery. So we'll definitely talk about the implications of that. And we're also going to touch on the Super Bowl, the super controversy over the Super Bowl. That has been brewing this last week. And even if you're not a Super Bowl watcher, you couldn't have missed the controversy. It massively overspilled the game. And then finally, we've got our Knucklehead Noise Bowl, where we'll talk about some nonsense that came out of the Grammys. Oddly, I guess you could say maybe even a little related to the whole Super Bowl thing. But so we'll get to all that. But before we do, let me introduce you to our panel. We have with us Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. My name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. So let's jump right in it, and we're going to start with our quote of the day, and that is going to be from Jimmy Lai. So, like I said, he is a journalist and the founder of the Next Media in Hong Kong, and he was a person who came over as a child from mainland China and experienced freedom in Hong Kong, and wound up being sort of radicalized by what he saw happening in Tiananmen Square. And so he became a voice for free speech there. He sort of turned all of his attention to creating media to be able to display what was going on over there and to help promote liberty in Hong Kong. And when Hong Kong fell recently, they took away his news organization, and he is sitting in jail currently. And they just gave him a 20-year sentence. But he had a quote that I thought was very appropriate to the moment, and he said, "When you lose freedom, you lose everything." And so and we have a little bit of a video clip that I wanted to give. And Liana, let me play this real quick, and then I'll let you comment on it. So this is to give people a little bit of a quick background on who Jimmy Lai is.
Jimmy Lai, the owner of the periodical, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for supposedly masterminding a conspiracy to commit sedition and collude with foreign forces through the publication. Human Rights Watch has denounced the punishment as a death sentence for the 78-year-old.
Jimmy Lai is a true champion of free speech. I first heard about his story in a movie called The Hong Konger, which you can find online at thehongkongermovie.com, and it's free out there. So if you want to find out more information about his journey and his struggle for liberty. But let's hear a little bit more in this news piece about who Jimmy Lai was.
A migrant from mainland China who stowed away in a boat to Hong Kong in hopes for a better life in the then British colony, Lai made a fortune in the garment industry before founding the newspaper in 1995. It openly criticized the government, and Lai himself participated in pro-democracy protests after the island returned to Chinese rule. In 2020, Beijing imposed the national security law on Hong Kong, paving the way to bring the territory in line with its authoritarian rules. That same year, Hong Kong security agents raided the Apple Daily's offices.
Following that action by the Chinese government to suppress his speech and arrest him, Lai's media empire folded shortly thereafter. It had actually a subscriber base of, I think, 5 million. So I think it was the largest in Hong Kong. So it's definitely a blow to free speech in that area. Let's hear a little bit more from Lai himself.
A stalwart for press freedom, Lai chose not to flee.
If I leave, not only I disgrace myself, I discredit Apple Daily and also undermine the solidarity of the democratic movement. It's something I have to take responsibility.
Jimmy Lai and 6 journalists were arrested, but he was the only one to plead innocent to charges. While critics decry what they describe as the death of press freedom in Hong Kong, the territory's government has insisted that the charges had nothing to do with it.
And so there you have it. He's facing now essentially a death sentence in prison because the sentence they've hit him with is, probably going to outlast his years. So what do you think about all of this, Leon?
Well, Hong Kong was really a beacon of freedom up until 1997 when the Chinese took over. And they did take over with a big hurrah about two systems, one country, that the mainland was going to be, remain in its communist ways with a little bit of capitalism. But Hong Kong was supposed to be that beacon of freedom. It was going to remain so under Chinese rule. But it didn't. It didn't. Bit by bit, the Chinese Communist government took over Hong Kong. And people like Jimmy Lai became a threat to the power and authority of the Communist Party. So Jimmy Lai wasn't persecuted because he did anything wrong. I could almost guarantee that. He was prosecuted because he believed in freedom. He believed in democracy. And just like the quote say, when you lose freedom, you lose everything. And the Chinese government, the Communist Party, have now made sure that he lost everything because he have lost his freedom. Apparently sentenced, it's a death sentence. He's 78 years old, and he's not going to make it to 98. And even if he does, what quality of life he will have after that? So this is nothing but the government trying to silence one of his critics. That's all it is. And they just sent a message to all of Hong Kong: fall in line or you'll get the Jimmy Lai treatment. That's what they're trying to do. Because, like he said, when you lose your freedom, you lose everything. And he have just lost everything.
Yeah. And like I said, I was showing in the video there too, but it's a pretty outstanding documentary. I think I saw it about a couple of years ago, I think maybe a year and a half ago or so. But I can't even remember if it was at Freedom Fest or sort of a local event that I saw it at. But a really inspiring movie. And I mean, this is somebody today who is fighting for the liberty in the place he was from. And what makes his story really exceptional is he was wealthy. He owned a company. He could have just cashed in and taken off when the heat started to come on, and he stayed to fight for the freedom of people in Hong Kong. And of course, when Britain left, that was part of the agreement that they had, part of the 100-year, I think it was a treaty that they had. But once they left, now China is scooping them up. And so this was really, really sad development. But I had actually planned to use a different quote of the day to start the show, but I felt like this was too important not to do today since it's happening now. So, definitely something if you, want to, look at how you might be able to make a difference out there. This is a guy who's trying to do that. And certainly, I'm sure he could use all the help he can get right now, but
absolutely. But, I have to say there's one good thing that comes out of this. It's a very high price that Jimmy Lai is gonna pay, and he will suffer quite a lot. But the Chinese government, the Communist Party, have successfully made this man into a martyr, and his imprisonment may serve as a greater cause for freedom in Hong Kong. So that may be the only good thing that will come out of this. I know Jimmy Lai is probably going to die in prison, but his efforts and his struggle and his legacy will live on long past his physical death.
Yeah.
So that may be the only good thing that comes out of this. And it is not too bad. is not too bad for the cause of freedom, but it's really too bad for Jimmy Lyle himself.
Well, and as I was mentioning before, that's the HongKongerMovie.com. So you can check that out for free there. So, and it's available to share as well. So,
Okay.
It's one of
where do you find it? Where is it available?
Well, I've got the link right up here. It's called the HongKongerMovie.com. So it's
okay.
But like I said, it's free. So it's just something worth checking out. But anyways, that's something to check out. Another thing, if you happen to be in the Sacramento area, the Constitution discussion group is still going strong, and they're going to be talking about the judiciary on 2/29 coming up in a few weeks. So we're far enough ahead that if you're seeing this on public access here in Sacramento, you still might have a chance to get to see it. Usually when I'm mentioning these things, it's already passed by the time you see it. So, but anyways, so let's get to the some of the other stuff we were going to talk about today. One of those is the big decision that was made in a case of a detransitioner who wound up winning a $2 million judgment against the New York doctors that did the surgery on her. And this is a big issue that we've talked about a lot on this show, about the issue of whether or not people should be able to be, minors should be able to get this type of surgery. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that as it comes up. But this has big implications because regardless of whether or not the law is allowing it, now some of these doctors are going to start facing liability. And that's pretty huge. So let's watch a little video to get us all up to speed on what this issue is about.
A New York jury just handed a $2 million judgment to a detransitioner who says her doctors rushed her into gender surgery as a teen. Fox Varian, now 22, got $1.6 million for the pain from her breast removal at 16, plus $400,000 for future medical bills. She's part of a growing wave of detransitioners suing doctors for pushing transition procedures they later regretted. Varian testified she felt instant regret, nerve pain, and lifelong shame from being disfigured.
Of course, this issue isn't just specific to New York. It goes into other states as well.
This comes after the Supreme Court upheld bans on minor trans surgeries in Tennessee and over 20 states last June. But in places like New York and California, doctors face new liability risks for these safe haven procedures. Activists are pushing to extend statutes of limitations since regret can take years to hit, giving detransitioners a real shot at justice.
Meanwhile, in 2025, the federal government was quite active in finding ways to prohibit transgender care for minors.
The Justice Department has sent subpoenas to Boston Children's Hospital over healthcare fraud allegations related to sex change surgeries on children. The hospital is one of 3 in the U.S. that the FBI is currently investigating for potential violations of a federal statute that prohibits genital mutilation of children. At the same time, the Federal Trade Commission has also launched its own investigation into irreversible gender procedures to see if healthcare providers are failing to disclose the risks associated with these procedures and if they're making false claims to encourage them.
So, as you can see, the government is starting to move on some of this stuff, and change of administrations, I guess. And
yes, definitely,
but let's hear a little bit. We have a video here that shows it's about the same case, but they're talking to a whistleblower who actually worked in one of these clinics, and so she's sort of spilling her guts about what she was seeing in some of this.
The 22-year-old reportedly testified, quote, "I was 16 and I was really, really mentally ill. I obviously wasn't mature enough to make the decision to have surgery, and I certainly was not mature enough to handle the aftermath." Our next guest is one of the first children's transgender public whistleblowers in the United States. Jamie Reed was a caseworker at the Washington University Transgender Center.
Let's see what Jamie says is the norm for treatment in this field as she's witnessed it.
I think about this young woman at 16 years old. She said she was browbeaten by her doctor to have this, and the mother was warned that her daughter might commit suicide if she didn't make a decision like this at 16. Is that kind of pressure commonplace in this field?
Absolutely it is. And that's part of why today I am so grateful that this jury decided on this plaintiff's behalf. In my center alone, when I think about how many patients were similar to this patient who just won this lawsuit, I believe that there are hundreds simply in one clinic where I worked. There are thousands and thousands of young people across this country who were treated in the same egregious manner that this patient was, who deserve their day in court, and their parents too.
So why does Jamie think that this kind of malpractice is occurring in these clinics?
This is no longer a medical standard. Right now, this is a belief system that has been spread through the medical system. These providers have a false belief that they were saving children from the potential of suicide by doing these things. There's no evidence to back that up. And now we are starting to see this belief system basically crumble in the face of lawsuits, which I hope that there will be many, many more to come.
And so there you have it. And this is, many hospitals now are starting to get nervous about this too, with all of this action. And some of them, like, Kaiser and some of these others, have started to put a pause on whether or not they're going to do any more of these types of surgery on minors. So I did want to talk about the perspective of some of these kids, but Leon, did you want to sort of jump in at this point and, give any of your thoughts on this whole thing?
Gender dysphoria is really a difficult thing for some of our fellow citizens, and it's something that we should treat seriously. But what have been done in the name of care and attention to the needs of some of our children is nothing but a disgrace. These kids really do need serious psychological intervention. And I hope and pray that they do get it eventually. But this thing called gender affirming care is nothing but downright butchery. They're mutilating our children and calling it care. Imagine that. They are cutting off healthy body parts or giving them drugs, puberty blockers, and hormone therapy that will interfere with their natural development and calling it care. If the power was within me, every doctor in America who have done this to minors will end up in prison. And every parent who allowed this to happen will go to the same place. Because this is nothing but malpractice upon our children being used as guinea pigs. There's no evidence, none, zero, that people can change sex or people can change their gender, because we are all born with a chromosomal structure, like male XY, female XX. And there's no amount of drugs and no amount of surgery in the world that can change that. So, you look at some of these doctors, and this is not the first time we have heard this story about, oh, if you don't do this for your child, they'll commit suicide. Well, just think about that for a second, okay? If anyone calls a suicide hotline, do you ask them, oh, are you suffering a gender dysphoria? Oh, I see. That's why you're going to commit suicide if you don't get the gender affirming care. No, that's not what you would do. Someone calls the suicide hotline. They obviously need some kind of psychological intervention, and the person on the other line will do everything they can to get that psychological intervention. Yet we have these doctors telling parents, excuse me, that, your kid is going to commit suicide if you don't do this. Well, if the kid is going to commit suicide, that's a psychological problem, and it should be treated as such. But the doctors are telling them, well, if you don't do it, that psychological thing that you're supposed to get, don't worry about it. We have a better plan. We're going to chop off your breast, chop off your penis, and we're going to make you into a different gender. This is insanity. Insanity going amok. And these people should go to prison because of what they are doing to our children. These drugs and these so-called surgeries, gender affirming cares, are nothing but butchery and mutilation. And these people should pay the price for this. Even the parents.
Yeah. Yeah, from a liberty perspective, it does make me. I mean, we've talked about this before on the show, and I think both me and Leon would agree on the sense that this is probably a bad idea for anybody to think about doing to them.
A bad idea is put it in mildly, Jason. But go ahead.
Yeah, and certainly, doing it to your kids. But that said, it does worry me a little bit on the liberty side when we start saying that the state should step in for the judgment of the parent. And, that's a kind of a really tough line because, we, as we talked about before on the show, I mean, we just came through a COVID period where the government was telling us that these mystery drugs were safe and effective, and that, boy, your little 6-month-old should take one of these, even though they have almost no risk, right? and at what point, when we, I worry that we're much more likely to have a systemic error if we side with the government on some of these, because you remember it was the government just yesterday that was literally on the side of pushing these surgeries. Now suddenly the administration's changed and the government is now trying to block these surgeries. But clearly the government isn't always on the right side. And so it worries me to give the government so much power to jump in and dictate what is the best medicine, I guess, for kids. So that's kind of the libertarian hesitancy in me and jumping in and saying, hey, let's rescue all these kids from their crazy parents.
Well, while I can see the liberty argument on this one, Jason, I can't. This is child abuse that's going on, and if there's any kind of child abuse going on, I think the government has a right to intervene to protect the child. Now, I could see a point in the sense that, well, the Biden administration, they were kind of pushing that. That's true. They even had a transgender woman working in the administration. Yeah. And they were pushing it, and they had
let me just jump in there for a second, Liam, but they would have told you were abusing your child if you didn't let them have the surgery, right?
True. So that's absolutely true what they're saying. But I would still have to defend the children in these cases through child abuse laws. I really cannot see allowing this to go on unchallenged. I really can't see it because, I have a grandson in public school right now, and I think if somebody try to do this to him, try to, turn him into he's a boy, so, but they think, well, he should be a better girl or some kind of damn nonsense like that. I don't know, Jason, you may have to come and hold me back, bro. Because this thing is such a dark and evil thing that is happening in America today with these. I mean, think about this for a second. If you believe in God, these doctors are saying that they know better than God, that God make mistakes because poor Johnny was born in a wrong body. That's what they're saying. Now, if you believe in natural evolution, the doctors are saying we know better than nature. Poor Johnny, he was born in a wrong body. Nature somehow messed up and got it wrong. Johnny was born in a wrong body, so we, those doctors, could take these godlike powers we now possess and change nature by interfering with natural development, cutting off healthy body parts. We could do that. We good doctors can do that. The very first thing, the very first principle of medicine for doctors or healthcare providers is to do no harm. And I cannot see how this is any good at all.
Well, and certainly, yeah, and their argument is going to be that, hey, they're preventing suicide, as we've just heard this woman, this Jamie woman who has worked in a clinic, say that that's the MO that most of them go with. We're saving your kid from suicide. But before we get to the break, real quick for our public access audience, I did want to show because you mentioned or Leon, you invoked a case of, well, what if the schools were trying to do something? Well, we talked about this on the show before. There was a woman in Maine who wound up having the school district there. They tried to essentially, they were trying to indoctrinate her child into thinking that she had, trans issues, and she wasn't aware of it. And then she eventually found out what conversations were going on behind her back. So let me just play that real quick before we go to our break, and then we'll leave our public access audience after that. So here we go.
Just always been able to come to me and talk to me about things. At the end of her 7th grade year, she began talking with a school social worker, but they did transfer her to this other social worker who I had never met, and he never reached out to me to tell me that he was going to be working with my kiddo. And it just, everything about it felt like the goal was to remove me from any sort of conversation surrounding my daughter's mental health. One day, family affair, we were cleaning my daughter's bedroom and we discovered a breast binder in her bedroom. And so I had a conversation with her and asked her where it came from. She finally came out and told me that the school had given it to her, and more precisely, the school social worker. It hurt as a mom to know that she was keeping a secret, but I think it hurt even more to know that adults were encouraging her to keep these secrets. It really makes you wonder what other things are occurring in your schools. It really makes you question everything.
And that was clipped from a longer interview, but clearly, you had a situation where kids, they're at school, maybe they're at a confusing age for them, and then suddenly the school district is having this conversation behind the parents' back, and potentially contributing to the mental health issues. I mean, these schools can't even teach English and math very well.
Yeah.
So
they can't teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, but they could teach you transgenderism, of course.
Well, but that's just to give you a sense. And here in California, this is an issue, right? Because we have a law in the books that is telling schools they don't have to, they're not supposed to even tell the parent if the kid is expressing gender confusion. But if you're watching this on public access, this conversation is going to continue online. So, but this is all the time we have for you. So go check us out at knuckleheadsofliberty.com if you want to catch the rest of the conversation. So anyways, back to you, Leon.
No, we had mentioned this suicide issue that doctors have been, some of these so-called gender affirming care providers have been pushing onto parents that, you have to make sure that Johnny becomes a girl, otherwise Johnny's going to commit suicide. I just spoke to this issue, but I want to emphasize this. The doctor is telling the parent, okay, that your child has a psychological problem, but we're going to use a physiological method to treat that problem. How insane is that? If someone is contemplating suicide, if anyone in America is contemplating suicide, the first thing they always say, deal with it through psychological interventions. That's how they deal with suicide. But it's only when it comes to transgenderism, we have to deal it. We have to give them puberty blockers. We have to give them hormone therapy. And then at the end of the day, we got to cut off the breast and cut off the dick. And excuse me about that part. Cut off their penis. And that will fix the problem. Why is only in transgenderism we do this sort of damn nonsense? Why? Mm-hmm. Because this is a fraud that is going on. Underneath all of this are big lies. Yeah. And I hope to God a lot more lawsuits are rained down upon these hospitals and these doctors and even some of these parents who are allowing this damn nonsense to continue.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, from a liberty perspective, I mean, I don't think, both me and you, Leon, we probably, if an adult came to us and said, oh man, I feel like I need this surgery, I think both of us would say, well, it's probably a bad idea. But I think that both of us would say, but being an adult, we have to recognize that you're free to go off and make these decisions on your own. But
absolutely,
with the issue here is we're talking about kids. We're talking about people who cannot bind themselves to a contract. So it's really who speaks for the child. Yes. And right now we've got a government that can go back and forth, like a ping pong ball. And and to some degree, the government is occasionally indoctrinating the parents, right? Like we've seen, even in this case, is working around the parent. We just saw in this case with this woman in Maine. But one of the things I'd like to share too a little bit, because we've talked about the particular lawsuit and what's going on in the courts. We talked about a whistleblower who works in the clinic and what they're seeing. And here was the perspective of a mom who a school was going around her back to interfere with her child's development, I guess is the best you could say. But let's see what the perspective is of these kids who are going through this. And so I have a video with a interview that has a couple of these kids who have gone through this transition process to some degree, and then they decided it wasn't for them, but it was after damage had already been done. And so let's hear their perspective in this.
The American Society of Plastic Surgeons sounding the alarm over the rise of surgeries for trans youth, urging doctors to delay transition procedures until patients are at least 19 years old. One study reveals almost 4,000 kids ages 12 to 18 have received trans-related surgeries in a 4-year span. We're going to bring in Chloe Cole, who feels she was misguided while deciding to transition at just 13 years old.
13 years old. That's how young some of these are starting. Some of them are even starting earlier than that. Let's hear from Chloe what her experience was and what her parents went through with this.
Let's talk a little bit about, at 12 years old is when you told your parents. If you could go back, knowing your parents, knowing now what they know, what do you think should happen when a parent hears from a child, hey, I think I'm another gender? What should happen in that moment?
Many parents, including my mom and dad at the time, will naturally tend to think, okay, so this is very obviously a mental health issue, which they are right about. And the decision that they'll naturally tend to make next will be sending them to a psychologist to help them sort of figure out where these feelings come from. But unfortunately, we live in a day and age where that actually is the risky choice, because the current medical recommendation is that these children, whenever they see any doctor, whether they're a physician or just a psychologist, they are going to be, and they're inevitably going to be pushed down the route of permanent mutilation.
That's right. And that's because they're told that if you don't do this, that you're going to commit suicide.
Here's another video of a girl who is on a Daily Caller YouTube short. And unfortunately, I couldn't identify her, but her story is very compelling. So I felt like it was worth sharing. I think it's probably representative of a lot of stories out there.
I really feel like some people in the trans community and the trans medicalists and the doctors really, really target the most vulnerable of us. I have borderline personality disorder, and I know for a fact that this is the reason for my transition. It's a very difficult mental illness, and one of the core features is not having any sense of self or identity, and my doctors knew this. I wasn't happy as a girl, so that meant I was a boy, and I was trans, and so I just took the cure that was handed to me.
I mean, it very much seems like a political ideology is being substituted for actually mental health care, which is what it's looking like a lot of these people who are suing or getting ready to sue are going to say.
I was told that I was being given a cure, and I wouldn't want to kill myself anymore. And it wasn't true. There are so many mental health disorders that make you hate your body, and the solution isn't to change your body, it's to fix your brain, you know? I just don't want anyone else to ever feel this way. I lost my voice, I lost my chest. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have kids.
And, obviously just heartbreaking to hear, some young person struggling with that and, hear the rest of their life is going to be altered because, it does feel like a sort of a cult mentality has invaded the medical community, yes. Right? And they've tried to medicalize something that, maybe should have been kept as a psychological, issue, especially for kids, right? Because this is something yes. that, a lot of these kids aren't in a position to really understand what their sexuality even means when they're, exactly. Pubescent or so. Yeah, it's just.
And the sad thing about it, and the thing that these damn doctors are not, these gender affirming care doctors are not telling the parents and the children. These interventions that with this gender affirming care, these things are irreversible. So it's not a matter of, well, we might start down this road, we reach a quarter way down the road, and we could change course. Once you go down that road, you start doing the puberty blockers, you start doing the hormone therapy, you try doing the cross-sex hormones and all these sort of things. The damage that is done is irreversible. And the doctors don't tell these people that. Well, if you cut off breasts and you cut off penis, I didn't want to say the bad word again. If you do that, you could probably put back some fake ones, but it's not a real thing. Okay? So these things are mostly irreversible. And the doctors are committing some serious malpractice by not informing the parents of these things. I don't know, Jason. This thing is so sad and so heartbreaking. I understand the liberty argument here and the whole issue about parental choice in these matters. I am most times I'm sympathetic to that argument about not getting involved between between the interaction between a parent and a child, not getting involved with that. But I don't know, Jason. If a parent is permitting it, that parent also needs psychological help, very seriously. Because I don't know how any parent could think that their child that they held in the arm as a boy all of a sudden could become a girl, or that could happen. Who is the God that's going to make that happen? Yeah. I held both of my boys. Well, my first kid, I held him in my arms. He's now soon to be 43, but I held him in my arms before his mother did. And I knew at that time, this was my little boy. And some fool is not going to come and tell me, say, 12, 13 years down the road, 14 down, poor my little kid. He should be a girl. He will live better as a girl. No, this is damn nonsense. And you could see through this. I mean, you could tell me that my son may need some sort of psychological intervention. And as a parent, I would do everything I can to make sure he or she has that. Right? I don't have any girl children, but if I did. But you can't tell me any rational parent will sit there 12, 13, 14 years, your little Johnny as a boy, and some fool of a doctor is going to come along and say, no. Johnny's going to have a better life as a girl.
Yeah.
I just can't wrap my mind around that. I can't.
I'm a little more concerned that it'll be some fool from the government will empower some fool from the doctor's office. Right?
Jason, this is a case about perfection and good, Mm-hmm. I know the government have done a lot of harm, okay? They really have. And they have really been the biggest crusher of liberty, the biggest destroyer of liberty in human history. I would say governments collectively have been that. But I think overall, since I believe, and this is where I start with my argument on this issue, on this particular issue, I believe this thing that they call gender affirming care, when practiced in minors, is downright evil, and it is child abuse. And I think in all other cases where we identify child abuse, we allow the government to intervene. Now, are there times that the heavy hand of government come along and make some very bad decisions? Well, we saw a lot of that in COVID. Yes.
Or inject some insanity into the world, pushing some terrible ideas.
Yes. True. I see all that.
I mean, remember that woman that we were listening to from Maine. The government was propagandizing her child without her knowing about it, right? The government empowered itself to come in, and it wasn't a doctor just roped that child in off the street, right? I mean, you placed that child in the government's care, and then the government was turning around and propagandizing that child without the parent having any understanding what was happening there and calling it gender care, right? So this is
gender affirming care.
So this is really tough. I mean, it's not. It's hard to say it's exactly black and white, because if you give the government all that power, government may wind up using it again for exactly what you don't want it to do.
Well, there's always that risk. Okay, there's always that risk, but we cannot make the good the enemy of the perfect. Okay, we just can't do that. We have to protect our children at some level. I wouldn't how we go about doing that in this particular case.
I would
we have to protect our children.
I would avoid using those words, both either good or perfect, when talking about the government. I think usually those two words should almost never be used in the same sentence.
well, listen. One of our founders, I think it was probably Thomas Jefferson, said we wanted to make a more perfect union. Okay, he did say that. All right,
more perfect. Okay,
yes, more perfect. I don't know how he is going to achieve that, but he did say a more perfect union. He did say that. So I'm not too far. I'm not too far off my hats here, because one of our founders said more perfect unions. I'm not looking for a more perfect union. I'm looking for a perfect government action on this particular case. I just can't wrap my head around these people getting away with this if it could be avoided.
Well, the bottom line.
But I'm sympathetic to the liberty argument on this. I am.
Well, the bottom line is now, no matter what the government decides to do, people are realizing they have the power to sue here in court. And
yes.
So this is, maybe that in and of itself will be enough to scare some of these medical professionals to be a little more responsible, I guess, in what they're doing. Yeah, and that actually seems to be the effect it's having at the moment. So, anyways, did you have anything more on this topic?
I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Did you have anything more on the topic? Because I was going to jump to the next thing if you're ready. But
I was just going to close it up by saying if we could achieve, I want my goal is the destruction of all this gender affirming care nonsense, and if that could be achieved through the marketplace, through lawsuits, I'll be fine with that. Seriously, I'll be fine with that.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately that may be, it's funny, a lawsuit isn't quite completely absent of government, but it does feel like it's a little more, it's a little more marketplace oriented than just asking your politician to make a law about it. So, but
and there, you see, and there's our disagreement, right? It's just which arm of the government we're gonna ask to take care of this problem for us, right? Because it's either the courts or the legislator, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not too far off, right? I'm not too far off.
Well, if it is a jury, I don't know if these things, a civil case, it probably, it might be a judge, who knows? But anyways,
in civil cases, many times if the if the potential outcome could be more than a certain amount, it will be a jury. Okay. But if it's like below $1,000 or $2,000, yeah, a judge may decide it all by himself.
Well, in this case, then maybe it is a little bit better of a pattern, because then you kind of have your citizens to help check what makes sense, and not just the government. So, that's maybe that's a little bit better. Okay. So, so if the government's going crazy, maybe there's a chance that there's a majority on that jury aren't as crazy as the government. Yeah. But anyways, let's speaking of crazy controversies, this was kind of a serious one we just got off of, but the Super Bowl brought with it this year a supersized controversy, and it all has to do with I guess what language you're going to hear it in. Specifically, we're talking about the halftime show, and it was over a performer named Bad Bunny. And let's see if we can bring that up. And it's kind of the hottest issue going on outside of oh gosh, I'm not sure, outside of Epstein Island. This is probably the hottest topic right now. So let's watch the video here so everybody can get kind of up to speed on what the controversy around Bad Bunny is.
The Super Bowl halftime show was a ginormous rating success. 135.4 million people watched the Bad Bunny spectacular, making it the most watched halftime show in history.
Ratings-wise, the Super Bowl halftime appears to have been a success, but there was a major controversy that has been brewing around it, and let's go find out a little bit more about what it was.
But the Puerto Rico native, who sings exclusively in Spanish, continues to spark remarkable political backlash.
Not one word of English, one word of English, one word!
Conservative commentators are losing their minds.
Nobody understood a thing. We needed subtitles for our own Super Bowl.
Megyn Kelly is totally flipping out.
To get up there and perform the whole show in Spanish is a middle finger to the rest of America. Who gives a damn that we have 40 million Spanish speakers in the United States? We have 310 million who don't speak a lick of Spanish.
So conservatives are saying it is racist that they were essentially being forced to endure a halftime show that they could not understand because it wasn't in English, which is the majority of the NFL audience. Because that's pretty much what's in this country. Let's hear what the left's take is on that complaint.
So Bad Bunny, while he speaks Spanish, as Anna does, as I do, we're all Americans. It is so very racist what is happening in this country about Bad Bunny. Let's just call a thing a thing. Let's call a thing a thing. It's just racism.
So what did the actual crowd think that was there? Well, let's check out some videos of people who were in the crowd. It looked like a few people maybe moving a little bit, maybe a lot of confused faces. Let's watch a little bit more. So even though the NFL did a halftime show that was almost all in Spanish, and with no provision to assist the majority of their audience, which was English speaking, to be able to understand what was happening in the show, they actually were still concerned about another sliver of the audience, and that is the deaf community, because they actually did have signers available. So can't make this up. Literally a tiny fraction of the audience would be the deaf community, massive fraction English speaking, and no provision for the majority of the audience to be able to follow. But not to worry, there was competition from TP USA. They advertised their own halftime event for the disaffected viewers of the Super Bowl. Let's find out a little bit more about how they did.
They absolutely feel like this is a success. They're claiming success. And, we're comparing streams and live streams and replays to things like, the Nielsen ratings for the Super Bowl, which have not officially come out yet. And it's really hard to say how many people actually turned off the Super Bowl halftime show and turned on the alternate Turning Point USA halftime show with Kid Rock and other country artists. It's certainly one of the biggest streams for YouTube, for live streams concurrence. And that in itself is a major win for Turning Point USA.
I actually saw, I accidentally used the word conservatives are saying it's racist. I think conservatives are saying they're being picked on, is they're being culturally targeted is probably the right word. I don't think conservatives would use the word racist, but somehow I must have had that on my brain while I was taping. So, but I don't know, Leon, did you watch either of the halftime shows? I did, but I'm curious to hear what your take is on all this.
I watch a little bit of the of Bad Bunny and his bad nonsense, but I sure there must have been some people who enjoyed this sort of thing. Now, let me be clear: the NFL, the National Football League, is a private organization, and they can invite anyone that they wish to do their halftime show or to participate in any events that they wish to engage in. But as somewhat of a conservative and somewhat of a traditionalist on certain matters, this being one of them, I believe and I know I live in an English-speaking country. And I don't give a crap about people who want to get on TV and speak Spanish to me. I don't care about that kind of nonsense. Okay? You want to go speak Spanish? There are a lot of countries in the world that would love to hear you. This is not one of them. Okay? So even though the NFL have the right to put on whoever they want to put on, if I don't like it, I can turn it off. And in the future, if I don't want to watch the NFL or their football games anymore, I can turn off the TV and go watch something else. Then this will be my choice. But my traditional part of this is that I don't want this kind of nonsense going on. Most Americans here speak English. Okay? I am one of them. I did 5 years of Spanish in school and I flunked Spanish. I'm ashamed to say, but it is true. So I don't want to sit down while I'm trying to enjoy the Super Bowl to be given another Spanish lesson, which I had so many years ago and did a very poor job at. Okay? I don't want to do a poor job a second time. So keep your Spanish to yourself. No, thank you.
So just curious, in Trinidad, is Spanish like the dominant language, or is it just a sort of a fractional language? What's the trend there?
Well, we speak English. Okay, that's that's the dominant language. There are small sectors of people who speak something we call patois. It's like they used to call it broken French. I guess nowadays that would be politically incorrect to say, but it was broken French. My mom spoke patois, but that was not her dominant language. Okay, she spoke English as her dominant language. But yes, English is a language of communication, and English is a language of commerce. This in Trinidad, and now people do learn Spanish in school. Okay, my sister at one time, I don't think she is now, but at one time was very fluent in Spanish. But she never stayed in the area, so in terms of having somebody to interact with Spanish, so she kind of lost most of her Spanish skills. But I have a sister-in-law who's quite fluent in Spanish because she learned Spanish in Trinidad and then went to university and did Spanish as a degree and then got a master's in it. But so there are people like that in the country, but the dominant language is English. That's what we speak. And for most of us, myself included, that's the only language we know and can manage. Well, in my case, could barely manage, I guess. But that's the only language we know. So don't know. Yeah, English is our language, is what it is. Well, actually, in truth, we say Trin English.
Okay.
Almost like Trinidadian English becomes Trin English, because we do have words and things like that and expressions that are not in quote unquote the standard English, shall we say. Like one time years ago, I was trying to explain to you guys what the word mama guy means. Mama Guy is, if you remember, Mama Guy is you know, is flattery or deceit. It depends on how it's used in the context. But so we have
some kind of a trans term or something. Mama Guy. Oh, no. Maybe that is deceit too. I don't know.
You know, Jason, only you could take over a piece of shit like that. Yes, when the language police from Trinidad come after you, don't come to me to protect you. Okay, don't.
I've sullied your language.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, as far as the broader issue goes, though, I mean, I think it's like what you said. This is a private organization, and you know, ultimately, it's up to them to figure out what makes sense. But I mean, it did feel like they're giving the middle finger to the majority of their audience, because
exactly.
I mean, you literally, I mean, I would have been a lot more okay with it if there would have been subtitles on the screen. You know, and I've seen a lot of lefties who want to claim this is just racism or whatever. The bigger issue is, and they'll say, well, why don't you just learn Spanish, or why don't you just go translate it afterwards? I'm watching it now. I'm not going to, this isn't a project where I'm going to come back to the halftime show after the game and go translate the whole thing, right? So, and you know, I hear some people making the comparison, well, you go to an Italian opera, don't you? Yeah, but if you go to an Italian opera, you know in advance the opera is in Italian, and that's why you're there.
That's right. Yes.
There. So yeah, there's just a lot of bizarre takes, but in the end, you know, the market will punish, you know, if this is something where they've offended their fans. And I mean, look at the NBA and how the fanship has fallen away from the NBA because they've gotten overtly political over the years. And, you know, the NFL managed to sort of correct itself and maintain its viewership. But, you know, they've, you know, when issues like this come along, you know, that it's a struggle. But keep in mind, too, they also got this guy, and he is one of the hottest performers, and they're trying to expand their market outside of the United States. So you can kind of see where maybe this wasn't, you know, the intent necessarily to be a bomb in the culture war. Maybe this was just a business, you know, decision by an entrepreneur, and maybe it's one that went bad. You know, there's a case of the car story, how the company, I think it was Chevy or GM, they had the car, the Nova, and they put this car out there, and then that, you know, to most people in this country, that's okay, that's some kind of a space reference, so I'm getting some kind of a futuristic car. But when the car went south of the border, Nova means no go. And so, you know, so the car didn't do too well south of the border.
Yes.
So, for obvious reasons.
You know, yes, of course, yes. But I mean, the whole idea about the marketplace punishing bad decisions by companies, private organizations. In this case, it would be the NFL. I mean, if I would hope that the marketplace decide to punish the NFL for this, because even if, like you say, they were reaching out to people outside the United States, some of them probably Spanish speaking, you can't forget your base. You can't forget the people who got you to where you are, right? Which is us Americans. I mean, I didn't know nothing about football. We call something else football in Trinidad. Okay, so before I came to this country, I didn't know nothing about American football. Okay, and well, actually, it's soccer. Soccer. We in Trinidad, soccer is what we call that football. But the thing is though, I've come to this country. I've learned what football is. I enjoy it for the most. Well, I'm a big fan of the Super Bowl itself. I don't care about who win or lose. I just want to see a good game. And this is now an American icon, part of American culture. They have the Super Bowl in February, and you sit down and you get food and you eat all kind of junk food and all the things you shouldn't be eating all year round. This is the day you gobble it up and you enjoy the Super Bowl with friends and family, whatever, and that kind of stuff. That is what we expect. But we don't expect to be trying to learn Spanish at that point in time. Yes, if the NFL is trying to reach out, sure. But for God's sake, you have what, 30 minutes or something is the break, is the halftime break? Well, okay, you could do a little bit in Spanish.
Piece was about 14 minutes, I think, roughly. So
okay, whatever it is, you could do a little half in Spanish, half in English, and end up with probably, or end with do the Spanish up first, or do it, kind of mix it up, do some Spanish, do some English, and that kind of stuff. I am sure they could have put on something like that, right? Which would probably have been a little more appealing to all the audience, rather than this, all of the, how many minutes it was, all of it being Spanish. This is ridiculous. It really is. So I would hope the marketplace will punish them for this damn nonsense. There was a very good example of this punishment, which I would like to mention. I don't know if you know who Dylan Mulvaney. I don't know if you know who he is. Okay, he went. Bud Light, exactly. And the marketplace punished them for the damn nonsense, and I was so happy. I was so glad about it. So let's see what happens. I don't know what will happen because of this, but let's see what happens. But I would hope the marketplace punish them, because the NFL committed the cardinal sin of business. They stuck the middle finger into the eye of their base, the people who got them to where they are. So I hope and pray that the marketplace do punish them for this damn nonsense.
In other words, Roger Goodell, this bud's for you.
This bud, yeah.
Just for those of you not aware, he's the commissioner of the NFL who probably made the call on that.
Yes.
But this does bring up another thing too, though, and I can't help but see the parallel in this sense that government runs the schools here, and we can certainly see how the schools have sort of fallen in their ability to teach. But one of the crazy things that they do is that they force, in a lot of different places, I don't know if it's every state in the country, but certainly here in California, they force every kid to have a second language, and they force it through college too here. And to me, that's just like, let the marketplace figure it out, right? I mean, if the language has a value, let people decide that for themselves if they want to spend the time, because for some people, maybe it will be a value. There'll be an interpreter, and maybe it has something to do with the degree they want to get, some sort of business degree or something else. But to force that on everybody, I mean, to me, it seems like the much more important thing, if you had to choose, would be to the language of the universe, which is mathematics. And yet the schools are woefully terrible at teaching math.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So I just kind of feel like, this is part of the problem of central planning, and, this idea, just force everybody to do it, because wouldn't it be so beautiful? But there's an opportunity cost to learning these things. And for some people it makes sense, and for some it doesn't. And
it doesn't, exactly.
So,
just to tell a personal story, my daughter-in-law's mother she speaks English, but not as fluently as she speaks Spanish. And my son, who is soon to be her son-in-law, is learning Spanish because he wants to speak to her. No, the government had to come around and tell him to do that. Okay, the government, it's just from a natural interaction, just to make the interaction easier. He's learning Spanish, and he's getting pretty good at it. I'm kind of surprised when you have a language deficient father like me. I'm really surprised and impressed that he's doing this. And his soon-to-be wife, who is the daughter of this woman I'm speaking about. One day we were in a restaurant, and the waiters, I mean, they could speak English, but you could tell it's heavily accented English. Some of it is a little difficult to understand. Imagine here I am talking about heavily accented. I imagine how Americans see me. But it was difficult. But my soon-to-be daughter-in-law just sat there and started speaking to them in Spanish, and we got all our orders and get everything done correctly. it was so impressive to see how easily she switched from English, which was how she communicated with me and my wife, how easily she switched into Spanish and told them what we were looking for. She asked me what I wanted. I told her, and she talked to the guy in Spanish, and I got my order as I ordered, that kind of stuff. But no government had to come in and tell us that this is what is needed. Okay, no government had to do that. This is the natural course of things when people interact at a personal level or a professional level. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it does seem like, people maybe got overly consumed with that controversy in the Super Bowl just a little bit. But one controversy that I do think that the players had afterwards, I want to bring this story up. But is if you were a player in that game, you left owing the state of California more money than you made, which is kind of nuts. I don't, quite understand all the tax around this, but I guess they call it the jock tax, and it's for performers who go and they play in other states. And I guess if you're there a certain amount of time, you've got to pay an income tax to that state that I would assume is somewhat prorated, but it's apparently Sam Darnold, the QB who won the game, he wound up having $176,000 is what he made for playing in that game. But because he was here for so many days practicing and playing, he winds up paying like $250,000 in taxes because I guess they base upon his entire income when they figure out that percentage. Anyways, I like you said, I'm not 100% sure how these things work. Maybe there's a reciprocal thing in the other states. I'm not sure. Not really a tax person, but but it really seems pretty crazy that, here government is ready to put a damper on everything. So
exactly.
What are your thoughts on this, Leon?
No, like you, I'm not familiar with the tax codes enough to be able to discern why this end up being the case. But this game was played in San Francisco, of course, and that's in California, and you could always count on California to come up with some of these crazy ideas that will end up with situations like this, where you make a little bit of extra money in the Super Bowl, and you end up paying the taxes, you end up paying the gross taxes, you end up paying being even more than your little extra earnings. I mean, only in a crazy ass state like California, this sort of thing can happen. I don't know how it happened. I like you, I am not familiar with the tax code enough to explain this to you. But this is insane. This is nuts. Okay, and this is why this speaks to a broader issue that we are having here in California, in that California is driving away business. When we have crazy laws on the books that will make this outcome possible, it will always end up driving people out of the state. And we see that happening right now. So this is just another nail in the coffin for our success as a state.
Well, they certainly are driving away the billionaires. I just heard, I think Zuckerberg built a home, and there's building a home in Florida now. So, I mean, it's just like one after another. They're driving the uber wealthy out of the state because, I mean, it's essentially a money grab. They just want to, it's like, we had some more screwed up ideas that we lost money on. let's go soak the rich.
We got to pay for them. We got to pay for them. Tax the rich.
Yeah. So, you look as you drive down Highway 99 and you see these projects like a bullet train that has been supposedly on the books for 15 or 20 years. They put, 10, 20 billion into it or so already, and they got nothing to show for it except some hulking structures that don't have a train on them that they were trying to build some overpass on the freeway. And I mean, it's just nuts, that it's a statement to the futility of government here in California. And here we are, trying to soak people who are actually getting things done. We're trying to soak them and we're driving them out of the state. So just absolutely nuts.
It's funny how the left takes good words and destroy them, you know, by putting them, by attaching them to all sorts of crazy things. Imagine that disaster that is going nowhere, absolutely nowhere. Billions of dollars in overruns, still going nowhere. And it's been 10 years, 15 years now on the books. Since I think Jerry Brown was governor, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It's going nowhere. But you know what they call it? The bullet train.
Yeah.
The bullet train.
The only high-speed thing about this train is the speed that it makes money disappear at. Otherwise, nothing's going on this. And it's funny, too. I didn't bring up the story, but, you know, Gavin Newsom just announced that we're committed and we're going to, you know, fund this bullet train farther and all this. And then I guess they just had a big fire at one of the construction. Yes. Just absolutely nuts. But
remember, Jason, it's the bullet train.
Yeah. I wonder if Karen Bass was responsible for the fire control at that station. Yes. She had some of her what do they call that? Her politically correct firefighters there.
Yes. Yes. They want to fight fires with empty water reservoirs, you know. Yes.
It's a low carbon way to fight a fire.
There you go.
Just imaginary water.
Yeah, imaginary water.
Hold a hose and nothing's coming out of it, but you're aiming it at the fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we could virtue signal the fire to death. Who knows? You know, just point the hose at it with no water. It's a good thing. Yeah. It's a good thing.
Well, speaking of virtue signals, we're right about at the end of the show, and that's where we do our Knucklehead Noise Patrol. And so this is one we would have gotten to last week as a bonus if Leon hadn't had to depart the show so quickly. So we're going to get to it this week. And that is something that happened at the Grammys. And it wasn't Bad Bunny was at the Grammys, but it wasn't him this time. It was another person. It was Billie Eilish. And she had some political statements that she wanted to give, as don't they always? Well, let's hear about the controversy that happened at the Grammys with Billie Eilish.
And as grateful as I feel, I honestly don't feel like I need to say anything, but that no one is illegal on stolen land. Like, we just need to keep fighting and speaking up and protesting, and our voices really do matter, and the people matter, and fuck ICE is all I want to say. Sorry.
How brave and how bold of Billie Eilish to make that statement. Well, GB News' Ben Leo tried to catch up with Billie Eilish at her home in Los Angeles to find out a little bit more about stolen land, and this is kind of how it went.
Said what she said. So I thought, whilst I'm here in LA, not predominantly to knock Billie Eilish, I'm here for something else, but I thought I'd go and pay Billie a visit and just see what her house is like. She believes in no borders. She doesn't believe anyone's illegal. So does she practice what she preaches? This is what happened a bit earlier this afternoon. Still place. Bins are out. It's bin collection day. First of all, isn't that ironic? Massive gates keeping people out. I thought Billie didn't believe in borders. Well, according to the driveway, Billie does believe in borders. She believes in massive gates keeping people out. Let us in, please, Billie. We are here because this is stolen land, Billie, and we think we should be given access to your quite lovely $3 million mansion. Billie Eilish, she reckons nobody's illegal because we're all on stolen land anyway, but when it comes to her own house here in LA, I think she's got different ideas.
But wait, there's more. Apparently the tribe that had originally been on that land years before also tried to get a hold of her too.
So what was actually quite funny, Bev, was that today the tribe, the ancestral tribe who claim original ownership of the Los Angeles basin, including Billie Eilish's home, where we visited a bit earlier today, they came out today. They're called the Tongan people, and they're the Native Americans who were here before they claim anyone else. And they said, actually, Billie Eilish, we were here first, and your gaff sits on our land, and we've not heard a peep from you over the years. You're worth $50 million, and we've had nothing our way in terms of reparations. So it seems Billie Eilish and all her mates down at the Grammys, they seem to have opened a bit of a can of worms, Bev, that they may soon come to regret.
And as he said, the Tongass tribe, I think they're called, or Tongva tribe, they're trying to get a hold of Billie Eilish because they'd like to discuss this issue of stolen land.
These empty head celebrities who always try to give us all these pearls of wisdom, nobody's illegal on stolen land. Okay, well then, Billy, please open up your land, your house for immigrants. I'm one. I'll gladly move to your $3 million mansion. Please open it up. Practice what you preach. But it's only when this thing comes home to them is then they start to figure out, I didn't really mean it that way. I didn't really mean it that way. I just mean it should go out and fight ICE, who's just trying to do their job and deport people who are not supposed to be here. That's all they're trying to do. They're trying to do law enforcement, which is a legitimate activity for the federal government. But now that it comes home to Billie Eilish, suddenly she have disappeared. Suddenly we're not hearing about stolen lands anymore. I wonder why.
I'm sure if one of those Tongass tribe people hopped the wall, she would probably be calling a government agent to come and remove them. But this is one of the tough issues, property rights and such. I mean, a lot of times the people of the left, they don't really think at all in terms of what property rights means unless you try and take something from them. Then suddenly it becomes really apparent.
Of course, yes. So then and only then they become a defender of property rights. When it's their own we're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, it reminds me of Bernie Sanders, Comrade Bernie, who is all about, fair shares. And yet you wonder what is a fair share, if there's so many Americans today who don't have a home and he has 3.
Yeah, exactly. How fair could that be?
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like everybody's getting their fair share there. But this is the thing, right? They always put the limit right above. The limit is always just above where they are, where somebody has to give their fair share. Yeah. Well,
Lord.
Yeah. I was hoping we'd have a few other of these issues to hit this week, but we just sort of ran out of time with generating things for the show. And we gave a full show. I mean, we're almost at an hour and 20 minutes, so we've gone pretty long here. So,
yes.
I can't think of anything else. Leon, you got any last thoughts for this show?
Well, I'll go back to where we began. When you lose freedom, you lose everything. And if we don't wake up here in America, we will lose our freedoms and we will lose everything. We are seeing too much encroachment of the government into our lives, even though that somewhat contradicts one of my positions I took tonight. But the government is encroaching, especially the federal government is encroaching upon us way too much. And I go back to this statement by Jimmy Lyle, who is now sitting in a Hong Kong prison. When you lose freedom, you lose everything. Please wake up. Let's not lose our freedoms, because then indeed we'll lose everything.
Yeah, and remember what his biggest thing is he was a free speech champion, and we're seeing free speech kind of on the ropes in a lot of places around the world that thought they had it. And Hong Kong thought they had it until the Chinese government decided it was time to move in. So this is one of those really valuable things. Our First Amendment, it is something to be treasured and defended at all costs, because it is the most important of all of the liberties. And I'm sure that is Jimmy Lai's sentiment. That's why he didn't run, because free speech was worth fighting for. But yes, definitely go check out his movie, the HongKongerMovie.com. You can find it there. You can find it through YouTube, but it's free, so it's definitely worth your time. And you're to see something that's happening in the moment, a great injustice. So of all the controversy of the Super Bowl, this is where the attention should really be. But anyways, I can't think of anything else. If you're watching us, think of how you can advance liberty in your community until the next show. And until then, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.